Mabel et Pouquet presents Talk to Me Africa.
Talk to Me Africa, teaching the world about African culture, African lifestyle, African taboos, and lots more. Talk to Me Africa.
We're heading into the Montgomery History Conference to donate my agbada that I wore for inauguration.
Mr. William Opeyemi Jawando.
Well, thank you so much for accepting to be on this platform, Talk to Me Africa. My name is Mabel. I host the show, I produce it, and Temi Tokpe, aka Temi, is a guest host today because when I saw the video of you, Mr. Jawando, you talked about meeting two people, one from Cameroon and one from Nigeria. I am from Cameroon and Temi is from Nigeria. So I wanted to bring that full circle and have Temi as a guest host so we can, be complete as far as your video is concerned. So on the show today, I am so honored to have Council Member Will Jawando, who is an attorney, an activist, and a community leader with a lifelong dedication to public service. Mr. Jawando, you hold a BA in sociology from Catholic University of America, and you completed your JD from their previous prestigious, Columbus School of Law. While attending Catholic University, you started the first NAACP, that's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. You started a chapter on their campus, a move that would chart the course of your flourishing career in law and in politics. Described as the progressive leader we need by revered civil rights activist and Congressman John Lewis, may he rest in peace. Will has worked with White House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi, Senator Sherrod Brown, and then Senator Barack Obama. And during Barack Obama's 8 years as president, Will had the honor of serving as Associate Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement, followed by a position as an advisor to the Secretary of Education, Ann Duncan. And he has worked tirelessly to ensure a quality education, opportunities for prosperity, and guaranteed civil rights are available to every American. Mr. Jawando, is that a good description of you?
I appreciate that. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I should have, in certain versions of my biography, my Yoruba name is included. And so, I have my sister here. So, Okbayemi is my Yoruba name, so it's William Okbayemi Jawando. Wow. I have some other names in there as well. But when I got inaugurated, I made sure that they read, to my full name so that we could have, as you hear in that video, I think, the culture represented. So yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So tell us a little bit more about yourself besides what I just read. Who are you, if you want to tell somebody about yourself?
Sure. I often say that I am the quintessential African American. And you hear that term and it means different things to different people. But my father is may he rest in peace. He passed away in 2017. But he was born and raised in Ibadan, Nigeria, in the southwestern part of Nigeria, grew up in Lagos, and he moved to this country in the 70s, like many people do, seeking opportunity, seeking education, seeking a better life, expanded opportunity for himself and for his family. And he was following in his brother's footsteps, who had about 10 years prior to him traveled from Nigeria to the University of Washington in Seattle to study. But my dad found his way on a scholarship to Fort Hays State University in the middle of Kansas. And so I often say I have both sides of the American story in my life. You have an immigrant coming to this country for education and opportunity. That's always been a part of the American story, or fleeing prosecution. This was on the heels of the Biafran Civil War, the very bloody Civil War in Nigeria, when he came in the early 70s. And then he met my mom, who's a white woman from Kansas who grew up in a farm town called Hayes, had a family farm. And her ancestors, just, maybe 100 years prior, had traveled from present day Czech Republic, the Austrian Empire, fleeing religious persecution, found their way from Baltimore to Ohio to Kansas, and they settled in Kansas in the late 1890s. And that's my mom's side of the family. And so she was going to school at Fort Hays State University when my father got there, and they hooked up and got together, met at a club and at a party. And then they decided to move east. And this is the other part of the American story, where you have internal displacement because of job opportunities. There were not a lot of jobs in that small town, and there also wasn't a lot of understanding of their interracial relationship. So they moved to Washington, D.C., followed my mom's older sister, and settled in Silver Spring, which in the Long Branch area where I grew up and where I was born, which is still a heavily immigrant area. At that time, it was a combination of African immigrant, Central and South America, and West Indian, and it's predominantly Central and South American now, but there still are African immigrants in that area, the University Boulevard and kind of Langley Park area. So that's where I grew up, but didn't go to Nigeria until I was 19. But I have always felt a deep connection to that side of my family. So we can talk more about that. But that's where I was born and raised. Went to the local schools, became a lawyer, worked, as you mentioned, some of my professional biography. The area I grew up in was a very low income area. And so I was very aware of the disparities that are present in this community. Even though this is a great place, depending on where you live, what schools you're assigned to, you have different levels of access to opportunity. And that was always very apparent to me. And we lived in a very poorly maintained apartment. My parents divorced and split up when I was 6 years old, and I lived with my mother, and we were very low income at that time. And I just saw that, and I never thought it was fair. And kind of culminated for me. I lost one of my best friends in high school to gun violence, and that really shook me to the core. And I started investigating why these things are not equal. So that's a little bit, about how I came up.
And Tammy, being a co-host today, also have some questions for you.
Sure.
Could you tell us some of your current hobbies?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of basketball. I played basketball in college, high school and college. And unfortunately, since this pandemic, I haven't been able to play as much. It's one of those sports that you can't be in close contact indoors, right? And so, but I do that, when I can. I play golf. I like to read quite a bit. I read a lot of nonfiction and biography as well, and sociology. I was a sociology major, so I'm always interested in how the world works and how people interact in it. I'm a big movie buff as well, and I also enjoy singing. When we were I sang in the church, in the choir, men's choir at my church, and so I do that occasionally as well. But yeah, so those are some of the hobbies I have.
Okay, and can you chat about some of your upbringing in Maryland and how that inspired you along with your dreams?
Sure. I think I went out of order a little bit, but yeah, I mean, I as I mentioned, growing up here, this is a great community. It actually just came out. There's an analysis that's done every year of the most diverse cities in the nation.
Yes. And
4 of the top 10 are here in Montgomery County, Maryland. Silver Spring is number 5. Germantown and Gaithersburg are number 2 and 3, and Rockville is number 7. And this is ahead of cities like New York and other places, so we have a very, very diverse community. But as I mentioned, not everyone has the same level of access to opportunity. We're very segregated. And so access to quality, affordable housing, access to schools that have the resources that they need, where the buildings are outfitted properly, access to transportation infrastructure, access to healthy fruits and vegetables and grocery stores. All those things are very spread out here, like a lot of parts of the country as well. But the difference is we're a very wealthy county overall. You know, we're the 18th wealthiest county in the nation. We have a budget of over $6 billion. So I think we have a special responsibility and opportunity to really be a place where everyone has access to opportunity. And I saw that in inequity growing up, living in a poorly maintained apartment, watching the development happen in downtown Silver Spring, the City Place Mall, everything that's happened. But then just 2 miles away, I lived in an apartment where I was scared to use the restroom at night because there were rats and roaches and mice and things on the ground. And I didn't understand how those two things mixed. Why didn't my school have an after school program, right? You know, why all those things. So I really started to investigate that through the course of my life. And it culminated for me when I lost one of my best friends when I was a teenager to gun violence. And he was also an immigrant, son of an immigrant from the West Indies.
Okay.
So I started to ask those questions. And I've really been on that journey of investigating and trying to break down this systemic inequities. And I'll just give you a couple examples. So his mother, she worked 2 low wage jobs. One was cleaning houses for people in Bethesda. She lived in Briggs Cheney. So it took her 2.5 hours on the bus to get there and back. So what did that mean? It meant that she couldn't be home when he got out of school.
Right.
It meant that, and then there was no after school program. And so he got involved with people he shouldn't be involved in. So those things are connected to policy and budgetary decisions. The decision to fund or not fund after school, the decision to have quality infrastructure that can get people, like the Purple Line, which is being built now, which can get people across to jobs and home quickly. The income inequality, the ability to work one job so that you can get paid a living wage so that you can be up in your family's life, things like that. And those are not things that are her fault or were his fault. They were just what we've decided as a society. And so I was exposed to all of that. My parents split up. My dad had big time problems keeping a stable job. He faced discrimination because of his accent. And even though he had a master's degree in information technology, as many as Africans do, are very educated, come here and struggle because of other issues. And so I saw that as well. And that also sat with me. So I saw all those things, but I also saw great things. And so that's a little bit about, you know, how I grew up.
Yeah, I saw the video. I watched you live on Instagram recently with Jason Wu, and I think you're doing great in that direction as well. I hope we get to talk a little bit more about that. But the reason why I got attracted to talk to you was because I saw a video of you wearing your agbada to your inauguration, which is something that doesn't happen.
I have to wear an agbada. I knew in that moment, almost as if my father was standing next to me, that I had to honor him and honor the heritage. It felt almost divine that the generations of my ancestors and his ancestors were with me in that moment.
You know, so what made you do that? Besides you meeting people who say, hey, I'm from Cameroon, I'm from Nigeria, and you have to wear the agbada. How did you feel putting that on for that inauguration day?
Well, it's interesting. It was one of those experiences. It's one of the things I'm probably most proud of that I've done as an elected official, because it was my first act, and I was very nervous. You know, I had it had never been done before, right? You'd never had anyone in the state of Maryland take the oath of office in traditional clothing from any country. And it's really, which is an amazing thing in and of itself. As I mentioned, Montgomery County, 1/3 of the people who live here, of the 1 million people, were born in another country.
Yeah.
And if you take their children like me, the sons of immigrants and daughters of immigrants, you get up to 45% of our population is either first or second generation immigrant. So the idea that I was the first to do something like this, you know, that speaks volumes. But I did it for 2 reasons. One, my father had just passed away several months before. And if he were at that inauguration, he would have been wearing an agbada.
Of course.
And so I wanted to personally honor him and his memory. He didn't get to see me get elected. He knew I was running. And, you know, I wanted to he died as a very young man from cancer at 63. And I wanted him to honor him. But then I also wanted to honor all those immigrants, all those, those 300,000 plus people that live here in the state of in Montgomery County and more in the state of Maryland that are coming from another place, who every day are trying to decide, can I be fully who I am? Can I be fully Nigerian and fully American at the same time? Can I be fully from Cameroon or from China or from India and be, and I wanted to normalize that and to represent that. And that has been some of the most powerful. I didn't realize how much it would impact people, but I hear from people still about how that just inspired them to be, just proud of who they are. And I'll tell you one little story about that. I have a group of friends that are from the continent, and I co-founded an organization called the African Immigrant Caucus, which maybe we'll talk about, to get African immigrants more involved in the political and civic life of the state and of the region. And so I was talking to this group, and I was like, I'm going to wear an agbada. They were like, and many of them were like, no, you can't do that. They were, and these are people who, with both parents, are from the continent. They grew up there themselves. I've always felt a little, as being someone of mixed race and one American parent, a Nigerian parent, I've always felt, you might hear my son screaming in the background. Yes. But I've always felt a little, like insecure about that at times, of trying to deal with that duality. But here are these full African folks telling me, like, you can't do that. Right. Right? So, but it's really institutionalized oppression. It's internalized oppression that we can't be who we are. We can't look like Timmy right now, who's beautiful and is
looks like royalty. Yeah. Yeah,
it's perfectly. You should be able to wear that anywhere you go and be fully accepted. So I did it despite all those nerves. But I'm so proud and glad that I did, because of the impact. And those same people that said you can't do that, afterwards, they were crying and saying, I'm so glad you did it.
Yes, my kids call that my Cameroon clothes. They like to put it on. They go, oh, Mom, I wear my Cameroon clothes today. And I wear that to work as well. My coworkers are getting used to my scarves. I just love that we are in a country that accepts who we are. Our diversity is so much welcome. We have to do that more and bring it closer to the people. Tammy, you have a question.
Exactly. Yes. And I've started to wear, I'm sorry, I'm going to let Timmy. I've started to wear other traditional clothes, like when I'm in council session, again, not just one time, but to normalize the activity.
Exactly. Yeah. Go ahead, Tammy.
All right. So with your dad being Nigerian, precisely Yoruba, and your name being Jawando, what other connections do you have with Nigeria?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, actually, my dad is the only one who moved here and stayed. So he was the youngest of 4 children from his father's first wife. As you know,
polygamy is
I come from a Muslim family, so he had 3 wives at the same time. My grandmother was the first wife, the eldest, and from that union there were 4 children. My dad was the youngest. All of his brothers and sisters from all 3 of those relationships are in Nigeria. So he was the only one that stayed here. Others traveled here and went back and forth or went to the UK. And so all of my cousins and aunts and uncles and were in Nigeria. And so I didn't travel there until, as I mentioned, until I was 19. My dad, when he came here, as many immigrants do, he came and he didn't really go back. He stayed here. It had been 25 years until we would finally take a trip together. And it was after I went by myself, actually. I went because I was on him for all these years to take me. My grandmother passed away in the mid 90s when I was, in high school. And I had only met her once. She came over when I was 1 year old. So I didn't really remember her. I talked to her on the phone. And that really got me wanting to go, because I was like, look, I missed out on being with her. My grandfather had died before I was born. I would see my uncle, his older brother, he would come over occasionally, but I really didn't have much of a connection. And so there were some cousins from other parts of the family that were living over here, so we would see occasionally, but I was longing for that connection. And especially when you get to college age, you want to know more about yourself. Yeah. And so I took a trip with a friend of mine over there, and my dad didn't go. And so, when I got there and started visiting family, my uncle met me at the airport. The whole 2 weeks I was there, everyone was asking me, "Where's your dad?" Right. Right. So the next year we took a trip, or 2 years later, we actually went together and had a very kind of life-changing trip. I took my then girlfriend, now wife of 15 years, with me on that trip as well. And so it was a very important trip. We visited where he grew up and visited my grandparents' grave and other family members. But so now I've gone back several times since then. So I go back, at least every 2 years. And we were planning a big trip for my family. We have 4 children, ages 2.
I see those beautiful
Yeah.
kids online. Thank you for sharing everything
Of
about your
course.
family.
Yeah, ages 2 through 10, and they haven't been yet. So we're trying. COVID hit, so we didn't take the trip, but we're planning a trip, hopefully, by God's grace, next year. To take everybody.
Same with me. I'm taking my 10-year-old son next year with me to Cameroon, so he can actually feel at home. So what memories do you have when you went back as a teenager to Nigeria? What made you want to go back? The food, maybe?
Yeah, well, it was everything. It was just the food, the exploration of self, to try to debunk all the horrible stereotypes that people are taught. The white supremacist ideas that are taught around the globe that were used to justify colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade and all the horrible things that have come from that. The understand your roots. Malcolm X, I know we'll do the proverb, has you can't hate the tree, you can't hate the roots and not hate the tree.
True.
And if you hate Africa, if you think Africa's bad, you can't help but hate yourself. And I think that's something we suffer from. It's improved, but it's still a big problem for the diaspora. So anyway, I wanted to explore all of that, and I'm still exploring it. Right, it's one of those things where it's not an ending destination; it's a journey.
Yes.
So the food was great, but then obviously the connection. You feel a deep. If we talk about inequity here, obviously, on the continent, there's not a middle class. It's not a big middle class. It's either have or haves not.
Have or have nots, yes.
and that's something that's sad. So the beauty and the despair and the desire to want to improve that situation, that's obviously something that has stuck with me as well.
Right. For the lack of time, Temi, let's jump onto Mr. Jawando as a council member. So what attracted you into politics? You did tell us about your childhood friend who got shot, and that inspired you to get into law and now into politics. And I see you doing great things, like I said, with other kids. So what keeps you going in this field of politics that is so rocky sometimes?
Yeah. Well, we're certainly in a turbulent time in the country's history with politics, right? I think, thankfully we're heading in the right direction, and in my view, with the election of President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, a Black woman, right? So I'll say this: I think if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and this is one of my, for too long in this country, we were either denied, we as people of color, as Black people, legally and formally denied access to participate in politics and in civic life, denied the access to property and education and all these things. And so I just feel like if we're going to truly live up to the meaning of what the American dream is all about, supposedly life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, this opportunity, we have to be engaged. And it's not always pretty. It's not always easy. You have to deal with a lot of people calling you nasty things and all that, but we have to be engaged. And I truly believe that I have a responsibility, and I have a connection and a mission and an ability to connect people and get them engaged in a way that maybe they thought they couldn't be, or they didn't have the right to be. And I really try to speak for that part of the community. And I'm an at-large council member. I represent all 1.1 million people, everyone here, and I take it very seriously. But I have a special desire to represent those whose voices who have been unheard or marginalized,
Mhm.
because I think that's something that is needed now more than ever. If you look at who's been hit hard by this pandemic, who's died from COVID,
Yeah.
who's lost their jobs, who can't afford to pay their rent, they're people that look like you and I, and disproportionately. And so we have a responsibility to have a response that is proportionate to the disproportionality. And
True.
and so that's what I try to focus on while helping everybody. That doesn't mean I don't want anyone else to succeed, or I don't think
Mhm.
all people. I think everyone should have equitable access. That's what it's
Mhm.
about.
Right.
And when you do that, everyone prospers. When kids get education and people can have pressure relieved, and they can pay their bills, and they can start a business, and they can start a radio show and a TV show like you, that helps our entire
It
economy.
does.
That
Thank
helps
you.
everybody.
Mhm.
So that's
It
what I try to
does.
do.
Yes.
That's what I
So
try to do.
Right.
Tammy, if you want to go to the third from the bottom, the MD obviously failed. So that would be great. So we can have him
Right.
talk about that before we let him go.
I was actually
Yeah.
going to follow up on his comment.
Go ahead.
You already talked about the idea of your Agbada to the inauguration, and that to me represents freedom. Like you said, like part of what you do is to show people that there is a way out there, right? You could do anything you want to do, be anything you want to do. So with Maryland being filled with thousands of African immigrants, many of whom are American citizens as of today, tell us about what your district does in terms of reaching out to African population in that area.
That's a great question. There's a number of mechanisms. I'll start saying we can always do more, and I push us to do more. There is, we started something called the African Affairs Advisory Group, which I'm a former member of, where it's a group of folks who come together from all around the continent that live in Montgomery County to advise the government on, keep them abreast of issues, create a dialogue about what is happening, where there are needs, bringing ideas to the table, business ideas, et cetera. So that's one mechanism. It's kind of like an advisory committee. I mentioned the African Immigrant Caucus, which was, I'm a co-founder of. That works to engage the African immigrant diaspora in civic life in the area. So running for office, understanding the issues, organizing. We recently had a vigil for the horrible massacres in Nigeria. And just giving voice to that, because like I said, there's no, you mentioned this, but I think people don't understand a lot. And between the DC, Maryland, and Virginia, you have the highest proportion of Africans of any place in the country. And they're, Ethiopians are number one in the numbers, but then you have many West Africans, and you have other Africans from the southern part of Africa as well. And so we are very strong if we come together, and that is part of the mission. And then I try to continually do, like, I have someone in my office, who you mentioned, Fatmata Berry, who's from Sierra Leone, who part of her job is to just let me know what's happening and connect me with opportunities to engage the African immigrant community. When we're meeting, I often tell my colleagues, and you all know this to be true, on any given, non-COVID time, but probably it's just online now, you can find 500 to 1,000 Africans here doing something.
Yes.
Like a scholarship dinner,
that is true.
A party. But those groups are often happening on a different level. Like, it's not, people don't know what it is. And there's great opportunity to connect to that and connect it to the civic life and the opportunity. For example, I introduced a grant program to help businesses that make less than $500,000 a year, but that rent retail space that are not restaurants. And so you think of like clothing makers and hairdressers, and there's all these small businesses that we have, but they might not have known that there's all this grant assistance available. So I'm targeting it so that we can try to get to that community. So I try to be very thoughtful about different sorts of programs and outreach and connectivity, so that I can understand what's happening in the community and that they can understand what we're trying to accomplish, and so that there can be dialogue and hopefully uplift for everybody.
Hopefully, yes. And I also read about the African Affairs Advisory Group, which is doing a great thing in your county as well. So thank you so much for what you do for the African immigrants in Montgomery County. We have two more questions before we get to our African proverb. I follow you on social media, of course, and I recently saw that you had your birthday recently.
Yes.
38 only. Wow. Yet you were so young and doing so much already. What keeps you grounded, Mr. Jawando?
Well, I appreciate that. I hope I don't look 38 either. I hope I'm still looking good.
You do.
I appreciate it. Just I try to be very humble. I know that I'm only here, because of the grace of God, and that tomorrow is not promised. Behind me, you can't see it, but I have a calendar on the wall. It's called a life calendar, and it has 52 boxes across and 90 columns down. And so each box on here represents 1 week of life. And so every week I check a box.
Wow.
And if you get to the bottom right corner, you'll be 90 years old. I hope to get off the chart if I can.
Wow.
But it reminds me that I don't know how long I'll be here, right? And none of us do. And so how do we spend that time? Who do we help? What do we prioritize? And I've always had a very sense of urgency to try to get as much done for as many people as possible, and whatever time I have. And that's how I feel about life with my family, with the community. You just never know. And I just want to have an impact and pass the baton, because we're all only here for a short time, no matter how long it is. And we all have a responsibility to do our part. And so that motivates me, that urgency. I think right now, the moment we're in right now, it's especially urgent. It's one of those time periods where I think there's dramatic change is possible. We're in a window, like not dissimilar to 1968 and to, the time period of civil rights struggle in this country, where I think we can look at these systems that haven't been working and maybe try to really fundamentally change them. That's my hope. But the time will pass, and what will we do? What will we have done in this time period to help people? And so that keeps me going and motivated. And then, of course, my wife, Michelle, she always knocks me down a peg and keeps me grounded. So that's, and the kids as well,
And she just had a birthday too, so tell her happy birthday for me.
Yeah,
I do stalk you on social media.
That's all right. We have 4 Capricorns in this house, which
wow.
So
that's awesome. So, I mean, it's a good thing to leave a good legacy, but more importantly, to impact the lives of many, like you've already been doing.
I appreciate that.
After serving as a council member, what other political aspirations do you have?
All right. I get this question a lot. My attraction to politics has always been the opportunity to help people at scale. And by what I mean by that is I represent 1 million people now, and I can impact the lives of those folks. We also, because Montgomery County is the largest jurisdiction in the state, and we get a lot of attention. I think what we do influences other parts of the state and the region as well. To the extent that I go for higher office, I have the opportunity to represent more people and impact more people's lives. So I don't know when or if that will happen. I know that appeals to me because because, not for personal gain or for notoriety, but because it would allow me to be in a position to help more people. And I'm very careful about answering that question, because I think we all have to check our ego. We all have to check our, why, our motivation of why we want to do things. But, I think I have an opportunity. I worked in the Senate I worked for Barack Obama. I worked in the White House. I've seen at the highest levels the opportunity for impact. And I'll just do this as long as God tells me to do it, and as long as people keep voting for me. So we'll see. But I'm not one of those people that I don't have to be elected to have an impact. If I'm not elected tomorrow, I'll do something else to help people. But I do think it's an important lever, because there's not, to go back to where we started, the fact that I was the first person of African descent to be elected and to wear an agbada, that shows that we need to be in that space. And I hope to be one of the people that can help be in that space.
Definitely. So on to the last segment of our show, which is to talk about an African proverb to share with our audience. But do you mind tell us a little bit about your book deal, My Black Fathers? I just want to hear something about that, because I saw you put out on Instagram.
Sure,
you got it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's a memoir. It's about my growing up. It's about Black fatherhood. It's about Black masculinity. It's about mentorship. It's about deconstructing these stereotypes of what it means to be a Black man, a Black father, a Black son. And there will be plenty of women in the book too, because you can't talk about any of those things without the interaction of everybody. But it profiles these 7 Black men, starting with obviously my father, and the distance and the absence created from him that necessitated these other men stepping in. And they're my 4th grade math teacher, Mr. Williams, the only Black male teacher I ever had. And going all the way through to Barack Obama, who I worked for in the Senate and in the White House. And I ended up spending my first Father's Day with him, playing basketball and playing cards. And he gave me a lot of wisdom. And it's a reminder that, the title is My Black Fathers, the 7 Men Who Made Me Whole, that this is a journey. It's not a destination, that I'm still benefiting from that mentorship, even as an adult and as a father myself. And so I tell that my life through that lens, and I hope that it ultimately leads to the restoration of the relationship between my father when he's, sick, and we took care of him as he passed and took care of him. He lived with us for the last several years of his life. And so I tell that whole story of my life, but also that restoration of that key relationship through these men. And so I think it'll be something that is unique. I haven't read this book. I'd be excited to read it, and it'll come out next year. So I'm writing it now, and it'll come out probably 2022 around Father's Day.
And trust me, I will be in line to get a copy myself. So
we'll be
thank
reading
you.
it.
So now the assignment I gave you to bring an African
Yes.
proverb to share with our audience, our listeners. What African proverb do you have for us today, Mr. Jawando?
This was so hard because, as you know, there's so much wisdom on our continent,
Yes.
right? And the birthplace of the world.
Mhm.
But so the one I picked is one that I use it to guide my life personally, professionally. It's a lie has many variations, but the truth has none.
Wow.
And I think that's something to remember today in this era where everyone purports to have their own truth, and facts, depending on what news channel you watch or which online website you go to, you can be told things that are just totally not true. I mean, the attack on our democracy was based on a lie, and that the election was fraudulent. So we're in an era where the truth has never been more important. And I try to speak truth to power and to be consistent in that way. And I think that's something that we all could benefit from.
True. Temi has one. Temi, what African proverb do you have?
I'm actually going to say it in Yoruba. It's Suru ni babaiwa.
Say it again, please.
Suru ni babaiwa. It means patience is the epitome of character.
That's
and that's something I think a lot of us should live by on a daily basis, because I think it would get us far in life.
Amen.
Amen. Mr. Jawando, I cannot tell you how pleased I am to have you share this platform with myself and with Temi. And I hope that this is not your last time on Talk to Me Africa. Absolutely. And I'm so grateful to your assistants. They were so helpful in getting this happen. So thank you so much for being on this platform.
Also, before we let you go, actually, if you could give only one advice to the young folks out there, what advice would that be?
Well, I thank you for having me, and I'll definitely come back on at some point. I'm happy to do that. You have given so much good advice already with your proverb and everything. I would say find what you're passionate about, what you care about, and pursue it, investigate it. It can be positive or negative. You can be passionate about wanting to correct a wrong or an injustice, or because you really enjoy doing something, right? Pursue those things, investigate them, figure out what you don't like, because those things will help you figure out what your purpose is. So by investigating and pursuing your passions, you figure out your purpose, and then you can put together your plan and realize the plan is something that will change. You will do many different things. There's no one right answer. So relieve yourself of that pressure And if you're noticing my alliteration here, the passion, the pursuit, the plan, and that I think will guide our young people. I think social media, everything that they're dealing with, they're always looking like, what do I need to be doing?
Mm-hmm.
You have, it's within you. And I think adults, we could all benefit from this. And to your point of patience, to use another P, things don't always happen overnight, but if you stick to those things, your purpose will be identified, and you will have a fulfilling life that sustains yourself and hopefully improves the world too. So that's what I would say to young people.
So much wisdom. So much wisdom. Thank you so much again. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
You too. You too. I look forward to seeing the show. Thank you.
Yes. We'll send it to your office. Thank you, Mr. Jawando.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We're heading into the Montgomery History Conference to donate my agbada that I wore for inauguration.
Mr. William Opeyemi Jawando.
So it's a pretty exciting morning.
About a week after the election, I went to the council office building for some orientation. May have come into contact with some of the security guards that work there, many of whom are immigrants themselves, several of whom are West African immigrants. On this day, there were two gentlemen that were there, both from West Africa, one from Nigeria, one from Cameroon. When I explained to him my name and that I was a second generation Nigerian elected to the council, he asked me, "What will you wear to your inauguration?" The other one immediately said, "You will wear traditional clothing." He said it not as a question, but as a statement, almost as if it was a foregone conclusion and that there was no other option. And immediately, and Cecily, my chief of staff who's here, was with me, I said to her, "I have to wear an agbada." I knew in that moment, almost as if my father was standing next to me, that I had to honor him and honor the heritage. It felt almost divine that the generations of my ancestors and his ancestors were with me in that moment. When we all come from different cultures, it's really important that we respect and welcome differences, even when those differences come in ways we don't anticipate or even understand. So by wearing this agbada, this traditional West African clothing in a public setting to take the public oath of office is part of a bigger and public dialogue that I think is needed if we are to understand and respect our differences and move forward.
Jimbete